Hello and welcome to our panel on mindfulness. I'm Nina Sossamon-Pogue. I am an author and a speaker. I'm also the founder of NSP Communications, and I've written a few books on resilience, but mindfulness is not my sweet spot. So I, like you, am very intrigued and interested about this conversation today. Mindfulness is having this moment in 2021 during lockdown and during all of the different ways in which we've had to adjust and adapt. Mindfulness is this new word, both globally and throughout the generations. So let's learn more about what mindfulness is and how you can use it in your coaching practice and also for yourself. And joining us, we have three panelists who are experts in this, and I'll let them introduce themselves. The first is Anna Maria McKelvey. She is the founder and director of the Mindfulness Coaching School. Anna Maria, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. A deep bow to everybody. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I started the Mindfulness Coaching School. It'll be 7 years in February of 2022. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't on my to-do list. But what happened was, because I'd been studying mindfulness and meditation since my early teens, like 5 decades, I knew that in my heart of hearts, if I really wanted to walk my talk, I needed to be accountable, which is, we know, a coaching skill. So I started the school. So I am accountable to my students, my faculty, my staff, at living the talk, living the walk. And I'm a licensed chaplain, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And you hit a certain age where you've done a lot of different things in your life. And so I've just kind of accumulated all those teachings and learnings into the school so that I can really manifest and contribute to the world. That's it.
Excellent. We're so glad that you're with us today, and I can't wait to hear more from you. Just reading your bio, I was very intrigued by all of the different things that you have done. So thank you for being with us today. And our second panelist is Acacia Parks. She is the Chief Science Officer at Happify Health. And Acacia, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thanks for having me. My role at Happify and actually kind of my mission in life is to kind of bring the cutting edge of digital methods for managing and treating mood to the general public. And the way that we do that, and the way that I've always thought about doing that, is by bringing literally people have allegiance to one kind of approach. And I was actually trained in a sort of diehard cognitive behavioral therapy graduate program. But while I was there, I was working with Marty Seligman, who was kind of in parallel developing this positive psychology concept and the idea that you don't necessarily have to talk about illness in order to tackle it, particularly when it comes to mental illness. And then at the same time, I was able to take mindfulness training under Michael Boehm, who is just this like luminary. I feel so lucky to have been able to work with him. I did that kind of for personal reasons, right? I wanted the mindfulness for myself, but I quickly realized it belonged in the suite of things that we were building into this product as one of the kind of empirically based things that can help people with so many different things, right? Depression, anxiety, stress, resilience, physical health conditions as well. My mind was blown by all of the different things that mindfulness can tackle. So I became a proponent of mindfulness early on and have carried that through my career as I've sort of helped build up this company that tries to disseminate mindfulness and other techniques to the public. So glad to be here talking about it.
Excellent. We're so glad to have you. And it's really fascinating to hear your background as well and what you bring to this conversation. So thank you. And our third panelist is Charlie Harwell. He's the managing director of Bridge Builder Collaborative. And Charlie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, for having me. I live in Park City, Utah. I have to credit my wife for the reason I got into the mindfulness space. She's been in the space for 40 years. I got involved about, 13, 14 years ago. And I am the managing director of Bridge Builders Collaborative. We were the first professional investors that I know of in the mindfulness space. So we were early investors in such companies as Headspace, Insight Timer, 10% Happier, Interaxon, and then Acacia's company, which we're passionate supporters of Happify Health. And, I think we've invested in companies where we can point to 100 million people that are meditating today that weren't meditating 10 years ago on those platforms. So from the early days when, we would go in and talk to companies about mindfulness and people would kind of think we're weird. Now the work that Acacia and others are doing are being embedded into healthcare systems, into insurance companies and Fortune 500 companies. And just, it's, as you said, mindfulness is having a moment over the last few years.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And all of those different tech solutions that we can bring to ourselves in this new movement are really interesting. We'll talk more about them, I'm sure, as we get going. And I don't think that it's weird, and I think most of the people in this audience wouldn't call it weird, but some people may not have a great understanding of what mindfulness is. So let's just lay that out there first. Is it just meditation? Is it, what would you define mindfulness as? Let's start our conversation there. And I know, Anna Maria, you want to take that one and unpack that for us a little bit, just for the folks who may be joining and not have a great understanding of what that is. Heard the word, what exactly is it?
Mute.
It's a great question. And I remember when I was studying metaphysics back in the day, and people would say, well, what is metaphysics? And I never knew how to explain it, how to define it. And I'm the same way with mindfulness. It's from, let's see. For me, I can tell you what it does. It's a difficult one to explain, to have it defined, because when we're doing a mindfulness practice or when we're meditating, there are no words, unless they're the words that are just kind of coming up, that are moving out of our consciousness. And so I think that it would have to do with awareness, bearing witness. It would have to do with being able to pull ourselves out of the situation and look into it deeply without getting attached. And my background is I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and so for me, mindfulness and meditation is a lot about mind training, and it's like training the mind to come right back. It's like taking a nice deep breath. However, there's so many different types of ways to meditate and to do mindfulness practices. But bottom line is, the main thing that always has everything to do with each of those different ways is we bring our minds back. We bring our minds back. We start looping over here, and suddenly a narrative of 5 minutes has happened over here. And then we become conscious and aware, and we bring our minds back. And we bring our minds back. And that's why it's called practice, because we're not ever going to be experts at it. Our monkey mind just goes all over. So not really a definition, but I can kind of circumambulate around it, which is another mindfulness practice.
Excellent. Yeah, and we think of exercise or practicing something as more physical, like moving our bodies to get fit. But this is actually, mindfulness is an exercise, as I have read about it preparing for this, and exercising your brain to get used to this. Does someone else want to add to that, her definition there?
For me, it's just really simple. Mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
That's simple, Charlie.
Or distraction, right? Because I think, like also when I'm
be really a difficult one, though. I think it's simple to pull those words together, but the difficulty is doing it. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just had to tease you a little bit there.
And when I'm teaching to people who know nothing about mindfulness at all, a lot of what we'll focus on is a direct experience in a context where it's not that hard to pay full attention. So, we'll go to a botanical garden and there's just so much to look at. And the idea is, that it's a direct experience. And yes, there's no judgment, definitely, but there's also no distraction. It's the fullest experience of the present moment in a way that doesn't indulge in distractions about the past or about the future, or about how it's going. It's just directly experiencing what's happening.
Interesting. And someone mentioned to me, it's not mindlessness, it's mindfulness. And so the difference between those two, I think, sort of escapes people sometimes. Anyone want to talk about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. For me, mindfulness is an act and it's a verb. Meditation is a verb, even though it can be on too. But when I'm mindful, I'm present. It's like what Acacia mentioned earlier, Marty Seligman's work in positive psychology. I studied with him also about 20 years ago. He was just coming out with Chris Peterson, the signature strengths. And what I learned was the importance of being right here in the moment. And yet knowing that we're going to shift all over the place. So my training is pulling myself out of trance. And that would be for me mindlessness. It's like I go into trance. It's like, I get triggered. Somebody says something, I'm with a client as a coach. Somebody says something and boom, I'm triggered. I'm off and running in a different direction. Train my mind to come back into the moment. But in that particular space, I'm mindless. There's a trance that I just went into. And the pandemic put many of us into trances. Netflix put us into trances. So for me, that would be like we're mesmerized by our cultures, by social media oftentimes. And so then how do we pull ourselves back in and get really right here in the moment? And that can be difficult. I've got lots of stories about it, but I want to hear from my colleagues also.
I got to say, I'm pulled out of the moment by the fact that you mentioned that was 20 years ago. Because I was there around the same time and I'm like, what? That was a long time. Sorry. Anyway, just had to. But yeah, I do think that, the mindlessness piece, and this is something that I thought about a lot when I was in graduate school, because we were trying to bring people into flow and trying to understand like what's the difference between flow and mindfulness. And flow being this state where you're completely lost in what you're doing, but you're also kind of in a trance at the same time. So I think there are it's important to kind of be clear that like there's a lot of concepts floating around that aren't necessarily the same thing. So when I'm, completely in the moment, paying full attention to something, that's not quite the same as the feeling as when I'm, the sort of prototypical flow idea of being one with the music, right? It's you might be sort of completely lost in it, and that's a good state too, but it's not necessarily mindfulness. And it's also not the same as being in a trance of, eating something so that you feel better, but you're not really paying attention to your current emotions, or watching Netflix. So these are all kind of related attentional states, but not the same.
Got it. And
I want to do a
I'm
quick
mindful that the lawn guy just decided to go right outside my window right now, so I apologize for the extra noise.
We can't hear it. It's okay.
Okay, I'm so glad, because it's taking me away from this moment right now, so I apologize. Let's jump into, for the coaches who are watching, how can a coach incorporate this mindfulness practice? What should they know and be incorporating into their coaching practices? So if they take away something from this session, start with that.
So thinking about teaching mindfulness from a digital tools perspective, right? Because I've been coming at it, at least for the last 15 years, from the perspective of how can I teach concepts without a person teaching it? Just from, and then they sort of step up the hierarchy to coaching, to therapy, depending on like getting that initial foundation from something digital. So I'm not really talking about replacing the coaching aspect at all, but kind of paving the way, or kind of helping people understand like what's the thing that they even want to pursue coaching or therapy around. So thinking about it from that perspective, I think the most important consideration is that mindfulness is hard. And I think, Anne-Marie mentioned that, like, mindfulness is hard. You don't just like go to a weekend retreat and know mindfulness. It takes some time. It's difficult to do, particularly if a person is sitting with some anxiety or depression, that when they begin practicing mindfulness, they're going to feel, because one of the things you're peeling away is the practice of distracting from feelings that we don't want to be having, and trying to accept those feelings by just letting them happen. So it's really important to lead with things that are pretty digestible, at least when you're dealing in a sort of consumer digital context where there isn't a facilitator. Things like, savoring something, savoring an experience. Most people can learn how to do that, kind of see the value in that, and then from there be willing to kind of build up to something that's more and more difficult. But it's, for example, very difficult to sit with mindfulness right before you're supposed to do something that's anxiety provoking versus like right before you're supposed to do something you're excited about, and like you want those emotions and you would welcome them. So we've always used sort of it's not phrased to the consumer, but in our mind, like level 1, level 2, level 3, like to order the techniques in terms of how difficult they are, so that by the time somebody's being asked to do something that is challenging for whatever reason, that they already see value with less challenging mindfulness activities.
Nina, was your question about the practices or how to best do it?
How to teach it.
Yeah, for the coaches who are listening who want to maybe start incorporating this or learning more about it so they can teach it. I think you made an excellent point there, Acacia. It's not easy. People think, oh, I can go to a retreat and I got this. Very different to practice it and really become good. So.
I often look and colleagues and everybody, when I'm teaching meditation and mindfulness practices, I give them specific things. And one is, would this be appropriate if I just give like 5 different things? Just pretty
Certainly.
Because
Yeah,
one of the things that we learn in mindfulness practices is to be lean and lasered and very specific, go to essence, which I love. And that's a practice in itself, so not to themselves. But one of the things that I do is I'll teach just this. It's breathing in just. I often will use that in airports when I travel quite a bit, and just breathing in just this. You're up at the counter, breathing in just the canceled, just this, and it tends to down regulate our nervous system. And Acacia mentioned flow, and I just want to honor Mahali Mihai, who just recently died the last few days, who had, if anybody, as coaches, we need to know about these people. Like Acacia mentioned, savoring, Barry Schwartz. So get those books and really delve deep into them and study them, because there's much about coaching that's there. But in any event, just this is a wonderful exercise, and quick, boom, it's there. The other exercise is just to be able to take a nice deep breath and create structures that might be something like another deep breath and another exhale and another deep breath and another exhale. That's another practice. But one that's really easy is just to get an index card about this big and write, I meditate and do my mindfulness practices every day from 4:30 in the morning until 6 in the morning. And you put that on your refrigerator. And that's a structure. And that reminds you to do exactly what that you are a meditator. It's not something like, yeah, well, because there's a lot of people out there that talk about meditation and they don't do it. They talk about mindfulness practices and they've read the books, they've underlined the phrases, but they don't live it. They're not doing it. So we need to remind ourselves, that monkey mind in here, to do things. So those are just a few. And 2 more hour meditations. I have everybody, this is about as techie as we get, even though our school is all on Zoom, because I didn't bring my iPhone in here. We're an international school. All the classes have been on Zoom since the beginning, since the last almost 7 years. And so at the top of the hour, the iPhone dings and it reminds us, it'll do a little, some words that will say something like, may I now be filled with loving kindness. May I now be safe and protected. May I now be resilient in body and mind. May I now live with ease and joy. So each of those statements are different each hour, and it brings the student of mindfulness and meditation right back into the moment. And those 4 statements, by the way, are from it's called the 3 Treasures Practice and Research Study that I put together about 8 years ago. And it's a pretty robust study, all on loving kindness. Because the practices are, again, as Charlie and Acacia and I have said, it's doing it that's difficult.
Yeah, it's practicing. It's actually the doing. Uh,
Mhm.
great advice. And I like that you went ahead and shared those specifics. And for folks who are listening, who may be new to this, now you have some resources to go to, some people to read, and you can find the work that she has done in years past. So excellent. I wanted to jump over to Charlie, and as a change agent who's big, shepherding in these new ideas, what is your thought on what coaches are or should be thinking about when it comes to incorporating this? Because you don't want to miss out on this moment that it's having, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, for coaches, I think, the first thing is you actually have to incorporate yourself, which, we talked about before. It's not a moment to be missed. You know, Mindfulness may be having a moment, but you need to have a moment, and actually several moments. And the more you incorporate these practices, the better you're going to be able to teach them. And if you haven't incorporated, then it's going to be really challenging to try to coach people in these practices. So my perspective is that the more you can integrate the practices into your life, the more you'll be able to help people.
Yeah, and good counsel there too. They need to take it on themselves first before they try to incorporate this. Can people heal through mindfulness? That's one of the questions that has come up, and I know it was one of the prep questions as we got ready for this. But I think there's a lot of discussion about this right now about how this is a healing agent and not just a wellness agent. So, would any of you like to?
I can certainly talk about it from the mental health side, because one of the things, at least the thing that stuck with me the most about the training that I did at Penn around mindfulness was the idea that emotions are a signal to you. And as long as you suppress the signal, the emotions will continue to ring the alarm. And mindfulness is a powerful tool for letting the emotions happen, so that kind of paradoxically, by welcoming them in, they can dissipate. Right. So you're not trying to dissipate them, but you're allowing the alarm to be heard so that it can turn itself off. And that was always a really powerful concept to me, particularly around things like anxiety, where it's your body's trying to warn you about something and you're not listening to the warning. So it's just going to ring louder and louder. So, at least from a depression perspective, a really powerful role for mindfulness in acceptance around emotions that people consider undesirable, and all of the things that we do and the ways that we contort ourselves to feeling emotions rather than just letting them happen and seeing what happens, and kind of allowing that fear that the emotion might swallow you up, which I think is a really common fear with anxiety. That if I let it happen, it'll never stop. It'll take me away. To see what happens instead, in a curious way, when we let the emotion happen. I think it has healing properties in that way.
Yeah, and while we talk about mindfulness having a moment, depression and anxiety are having a moment now too globally, coming through, not over, but coming through the since we're still dealing with it. So I think that's good counsel. And people have tried so many other things. This is the next step for a lot of folks if they haven't tried it. Put this into their practice, their daily practice.
Can I just comment on this one?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks,
So
Charlie.
the concern that I have, because we live in this system where we believe that something outside of ourselves is going to heal us. And my belief is that we actually have the tools to heal ourselves, and we can be supported by others in that healing. But mindfulness, I think, really can help people. We call it a gateway drug to higher levels of consciousness, and that's really my wife's wisdom. But mindfulness helps to decrease stress, and we live in such a stressful world that if we're able to get rid of the stress continues to build in our bodies, and then over a period of time, and years and years, that stress gets to a point where it manifests itself in physical condition. And so if we can learn to teach our kids how to be mindful and resilient at young ages, they won't have the same stress patterns necessarily that, that will lead to these, to these conditions. But, to Acacia's point as well, when it's one thing to understand, the anxiety and that you're in anxiety, but there's a deeper level of healing that I believe in that we can get to, which is to understand where is the trauma coming from that's creating the anxiety. And for many people, that comes from unresolved trauma from years ago. And I think so mindfulness can be a tool to help us to begin to unpack the conditioning that we had as kids or trauma that we experienced, etc., and actually get to the root of the problem. I think that's where healing can occur.
Yeah, and I can tell, Anne-Marie, you have something with your work in meditation. I'm assuming you have with the with all of your work. I'm assuming you have comment on that.
I do. And I was hesitant, to even jump in the beginning, but I do think I need to say this, that my specialty is trauma. It's PTSD, delayed onset 309.8, And I have worked with people who have had trauma come up through their meditations and mindfulness practices in a big way, in an explosive way. So I look at it not as a healer as much as a preventative healer, because if one doesn't have a teacher, a meditation teacher to help guide, I think that not everybody, some meditators and mindfulness practitioners that get themselves into trouble mentally, and I've seen that in Zendos where a gun. And someone was going to shoot themselves. It was the violent retreat. Just couldn't do it. Just a 10-day silent retreat is difficult. Under the that he would be able to heal what had happened to him, and instead he just went way down into the rabbit hole. So we have to be really careful about saying mindfulness is a healer. I will say that mindfulness is an incredible preventative, that there's much to happen because of the resilience. This through your books, and Charlie, you mentioned it, that we get resilient, we become more mindful, and the somatic aspect happens. So the body memories that arise through the mindfulness practices and meditations are addressed. But again, I think we have to be cautious, not real careful. I don't want to implement danger in here or that energy, because it's wonderful to work with and I'm totally in. But I had something happen to me one time and I could not do my practices. I couldn't meditate. I needed to get psychotherapy. And that was it. It was like there was no healing there because it was a pretty disastrous experience that I'd gone through. And to watch it or to do kinhin with the flower in my house or something wasn't doing it. So I just wanted to kind of put that up there, a little asterisk.
Yeah, and you mentioned to get a mindfulness coach, and I'm assuming specifically in a mindfulness. You said be careful what kind of mindfulness coach you get. Can you share a little bit more on that? What should people be looking for if this is new to them and they're looking to go down that road?
I would get somebody who walks the talk. At the school we make, and I don't want this stunt up. So if you're wanting to do mindfulness and if you're wanting to do meditation, go to some retreats. And there's tons of stuff on YouTube. And Charlie and Acacia have, it sounds like some great companies that they present. But get a two-legged to really work with you and to help you through the humps and through the obstacles and obscurations. There's tons of books that have been written from the Buddhist standpoint of mind training that weren't just written in the last 50 years. The Pali Canon, it's like thousands. So look for those, become a little bit of a scholar. Study Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, mindfulness. There's a wonderful space, or a wonderful organization called Mind Life Institute. It's Richie Davidson out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. And that whole group of people that is associated with Mind Life Institute is amazing. It was started with, I'm sorry, I'm like talking way too much, but anyway, it's great. So do your due diligence and study, and then find somebody who you resonate with and ask them to be, your mindfulness teacher, your mindfulness coach.
Excellent. Thank you. And I love your passion. So don't hold back. I do want to hear more from Charlie, though, as you look at technology that's out there and new ways in which people are engaging. What are you seeing and encouraged by?
I'm encouraged, and to go back to what Anne Marie said, to complement the Mind and Life Institute. It's the reason my wife got me connected in that, many years ago. It's the reason why I'm here, because I connected to my partners through that. But what I'm seeing is that, first of all, there is so much scientific evidence on the benefits of mindfulness now that it's hard not to pay attention. And because the Dalai Lama said so long ago that we had to prove to the Western mind what the Eastern heart knew, we had to get research. So there's really good research that proves some of the benefits of mindfulness. And what I'm seeing happening is that there are some really good entrepreneurs who have taken and really made meditation accessible to the Western world. And they've done that through technology. They've done that through good user experience, through developing engagement practices that help people to come back, to make this accessible, to take the woo-woo per se out of it, that many people thought this was just, woo-woo and new agey 15 years ago or whatever, and to really help to bring it into various organizations, not in a one size fits all way, but in a way that that actually helps, the organization or the healthcare system or whatever. And one thing that I'll just say about that, and Acacia and so many of her scientific colleagues have shown the benefits. This can help people to improve creativity, or it can help reduce stress, or help to reduce accidents. If you're more mindful and you're in a nuclear power plant, there is a reason why mindfulness can help, help your employees to prevent, make sure that they're preventing safety accidents from happening. There's so many different ways that these practices can manifest to create positive outcomes that I think a lot of people have come up with really good ideas as a way to scale, these concepts and develop businesses around them.
Absolutely. And we're seeing it at both, like if you go to HR Tech or one of those, the SaaS platforms and benefit platforms where people are using this technology to plug it into their benefit offerings. So their whole corporation, no matter, you mentioned different types of industries there, but in any industry, this can improve the company's morale or the organization's productivity. So fascinating to see this on such a large scale, starting to scale in a really interesting way. And Acacia, with your platform with Habify, I'm guessing you're seeing, I'm sure you have data analytics and the research around it. What are you seeing that's happening now? Because I'm excited to think that where this could end up down the road, like 5-10 years from now.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about a lot as a benefit of technology as kind of a complement to the more kind of live relationship with a coach or a therapist is the ability to give a uniform experience that is tied directly back to the research literature. So that's one of the things we've been like, so when I went to the Penn program for mindfulness and I took these, classes with them, they were teaching a curriculum that was the same curriculum that was in, 40 RCTs that had all validated. Like, if you teach the foundations of mindfulness in this 8-week way, here are the benefits that happen, right? And so I was very mindful of connecting what we were building with the things that were in that curriculum. That doesn't solve for long-term engagement, right? We've all talked about how hard it is to keep up a practice and to tweak something so that it's fit to you personally. And it's hard to do that in a one-size-fits-all kind of way. But because there's this strong research literature about, like, here's how you teach the fundamentals that yields this particular set of outcomes, we can mimic that in a way that's consistent and pretty much the same every time, to open people up to, obviously there's lots of ways to make long-term adherence happen. Sometimes it's with technology, good reminders, good engagement with an app. Sometimes it's with a coach. We're certainly seeing as well that there are situations where it just, that's what makes sense, right? That's how you kind of make it personal and keep it going. But I'm very keyed into the idea of trying to emulate what's in the research literature so that we can feel some confidence that we're going to get the same type of effects live in the real world when we port it into a technology solution.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we look at ourselves coming out of the pandemic and the levels of depression, anxiety, and people going online for resources. They say there's not even enough counselors out there. So we're going to have to deliver this in a more broad way. This is just one of the ways in which it's happening. And Charlie, you've invested in different companies along these lines. I'm assuming they're capturing the data. We're going to be able to see where this is going in the future. I'm fascinated that we're just at this point, because I remember years ago that people started introducing these things. You're obviously an early adopter. And you would think they've already gotten past the curve. They were already the gorillas in the market, but we have a lot of new stuff coming up now. And it's not just psychology, remember to be happy every hour. It's truly, I get it on my phone and on my watch. I get reminders from all over, and I'm assuming that technology is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I think it's going to grow. And I think, one of the ways that it's going to grow is to understand how different people operate, and then to provide them the tools in the moment that make sense for them. So for me, for instance, meditation is a tool, a mindfulness tool, but meditation doesn't work for everyone. Like, for some people, going out in nature, for me, for instance, going out in nature is a wonderful way to practice. There are multiple tools and multiple types of teachers that work. And I think that the interesting thing that I can do and that science can help us with is to understand where somebody is at in their journey, and then to provide them a tool for that moment or for that period of time, for their next growth period, that is going to help them to continue to develop and foster. And then when they get to the next level, to find the next teacher or the next practice or whatever that's going to help them get to the next moment. And I think as we uncover tools like that, I think those are going to be really exciting to be involved with, and they can really help because we live in a culture. And I saw this in a lot in the early days of mindfulness, of people just saying, mindfulness is the thing. I do it. You should do it. You should do 20 minutes of mindful, meditation in the morning. Well, that's just not, everyone's different. So how do we develop tools that understand who the person is that's using it, and give them tools that actually help them benefit their lives?
Yeah, to be able to meet people where they are. And, we have the online intake forms, and there's lots of ways in which we are, serving the masses to bring in that intake to start to point them in the right direction. But meeting people where they are. And Anne-Marie, I'm guessing you mentioned the two-legged comment earlier. I'm guessing you have some thoughts on this. It can't all be technology. We've got a few minutes left. Share a little bit of your thoughts on that.
I'm pretty heart-based and somatic-based. And I also have a goddaughter who's into AI, big time at Yale. and perceptions, and she's got a department and everything. So I'm totally in. So we're always talking about this. I think it's real important to also, with the technology, have a two-legged right there with you, because they can help you. And there's a bonding that happens. There's a level of consciousness that happens. And it's what we also experience when we're doing global listening with a client and coaching. It's like all of a sudden a hawk. I live outside of Santa Fe in the foothills, and we have lots of birds. And all of a sudden, like I'll hear this, wow, and I'll look, and there's a hawk, and he's just staring at me on this branch. And then I'll look at my client and I'll say, so come out of your practice for just a moment. What does a hawk mean to you? Because your practice is the hawk now. That's part of what's going on. So that's global listening. So we take everything that happens within the coaching session and we pull it in as a mindful practice. And I'm also with Charlie. It's like I have a good friend who cannot sit, just can't sit, but he can do kinhin, which is slow walking. And both he and I have flagstone paths around our land where we just do kinhin, just slow walking, or the loving kindness meditation that I mentioned earlier. That's not for happiness. It's an antidote for people who are experiencing loss and grief. May I now be filled with loving kindness. May I now be safe and protected. May I now be resilient in body and mind. Not tomorrow or yesterday, but may I now live with ease and joy. And these kinds of things help stabilize us, and they help edit those spirit killers that can happen in our society. So we look for spirit openers.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me just respond. I'm totally in agreement with Charlie, but I think that there's got to be that balance.
Yeah, I figured you did. Just hearing you earlier and knowing your background, I figured there'd be a good yin yang there. But I think everyone's in agreement that in general, mindfulness is
exciting,
having a moment, and it's a good thing. We've only got a couple minutes left. I'd like to go back to each of you for, 1 minute. I would say wrap up, whatever you would like to share before we go. Because Charlie, I saw you wanted to jump in. I'll start with you.
That's
your
okay.
Final thoughts there.
No, I appreciate. I don't have much, to say to wrap up. Besides, I appreciate the group. I appreciate, people who dedicate their lives to coaching other people to help foster growth. I encourage people to incorporate, any practices that help you more effectively see a client and see what they need, and to be able to, to be with them on their path, to give them encouragement and tools to help them. I think mindfulness is one of those tools. And, to what Anna Marie said, I just want to say, I agree that, this is not an individual game. You need, people need guidance, and this is not just a solo, do mindfulness on your own. Do mindfulness with a coach, do mindfulness in groups, and practice.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie. And thanks for being here. I'll move over to Acacia, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, back to your point, Nina, about how, even if everybody in the world decided that who needed it, which is probably almost everybody, or everybody decided that they wanted to work with a coach, they couldn't, because there aren't enough coaches. And so the interplay between technology and human practitioners has to be collaborative, right? I think we need each other to meet the demand that the world is placing on us. And so more collaboration, and no threat, right? Nobody's trying to replace anybody. We're trying to help everybody in a way that is physically possible, and we have to work together to make that happen.
Excellent. Yes, there's a global need right now, and there's only so many people to go around. So putting some technology solutions and mass producing what we can in a way to help is really key. And Ray, your final thought?
Sure. Stability of the mind. I think we need that right now on the planet. Stability of the mind in the midst of having a don't know mind, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, it's like our mission statement at the school is, it ends with kindness and love. You know, that's what we're doing. It's kindness and love, and taking that to the street. But prior to that, it's about, you know, in a world that's constantly changing on an everyday basis, we need to be able to help bring stability. This isn't part of the mission statement, but help build stability. So for all, so that we can feel our feet on the ground and get to know our don't know mind, because there's so much out there that we don't know. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to get, you know, COVID on the way to Baja on Sunday of this upcoming week. Or what about the Denver airport? All the hospitals are closed in Colorado. Am I going to get the flu? Should I get the flu shot? Even if I got just COVID, what? So the monkey mind's going nuts. But if I just go, this is my don't know mind, then I settle, I take a deep breath, and I remember, I look up at the sky, and I'm right here again. And things,
Just this. Well, thank you all three so much. I think at a time when there's so much uncertainty, to create a mindful program or mindfulness practice in which you can take some control over something, even if it's just your own mind, certainly is a help to everyone. So we really appreciate you being here. And for everyone watching, we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. Enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you.